The air in the Gilded Sparrow was always the same, a warm mix of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and faint chlorine from the polishing cloths. She moved through it like a ghost, which was how she preferred it. To the people who mattered, the ones in nice clothes who laughed with their heads thrown back, she wasn't even a person with a name. She was a function. More bread, please. Excuse me, we need another bottle of the Cabernet. This isn't the dressing I asked for. She would nod, her voice a soft, practiced thing. Right away. Or, my apologies, I'll fix that. She never argued, never corrected, never lingered. Her name was Elara, but it had been so long since anyone here used it that it felt like a secret, a memory from another life. Her world was a circuit. The stainless steel kitchen, hot and shouting. The swinging doors that whispered as she pushed through. The deep, rich colors of the dining room with its low light and loud conversations. And in the center of it all, like a sleeping beast, was the piano. It was a grand piano, long and black, and so shiny you could see the blurry colors of the room in its surface. A small brass plaque on it said, Bosendorfer. It was the restaurant's pride. But in the year Elara had worked there, she had never heard a single note from it. The manager, a nervous man who checked his phone every 30 seconds, always said they were looking for the right talent to play it. So it just sat there, beautiful and silent. Elira's shift was a dance of small, precise movements, balancing 3 heavy plates up her arm, remembering who got the sea bass and who got the steak, timing the water refills so she didn't interrupt a story. Her feet ached in her black shoes, and her mind was pleasantly, mercifully empty. The quiet in her head was the point. It was safer there, but sometimes the circuit brought her close to the piano. When she was clearing the 2-top right beside it, or fetching a fallen napkin from the floor near its bench. In those moments, her careful blankness would crack. Her eyes would drift to the keys, hidden under the lid. Her fingers, wrapped around a dirty knife or a wine glass, would twitch. Just once, quickly, as if shocked. Then she would straighten up, tuck a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, and walk away, the blankness settling back over her like a sheet. The other waiters didn't bother her much. They were younger, students mostly, talking loudly about their classes and parties and dating apps in the wait station. They called her the Whisper sometimes, but not to her face. They thought she was shy, or maybe a little simple. She didn't mind. Their noise was a wall she hid behind. One of the busboys, a kind-eyed guy who was studying to be a nurse, tried once. Long night, huh? He said, as they both loaded trays with dirty dishes. Yes, she said, not looking up. You always look so calm, even when Table 9 is yelling about the gluten. I'd be sweating bullets. She offered a small, tight smile. You get used to it. You ever think about doing something else? You seem too smart for this, he said. The question hung in the air between them, heavy and wrong. The careful quiet in her head buzzed with a sudden, sharp static. Images tried to push through a room full of people in silence, not eating, just listening. A smell of old wood and lemon polish that wasn't from this restaurant. A feeling of weightlessness that came only from one thing. She scrubbed at a spot of dried sauce on a plate with her thumb. This is fine, she said, and her voice was even softer than usual. He nodded, sensing he'd stepped into a place he shouldn't, and didn't ask again. Her life outside the Sparrow was just as quiet. A small apartment with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. A cat that demanded food, but not conversation. A bookshelf with novels from the used bookstore, their spines cracked and comfortable. There was no music. No radio, no records, no streaming playlists. The silence there was deeper, more complete. It was a blanket she pulled over her head every night. Everything changed on the night of the investor dinner. The manager had been buzzing for a week. This is huge, people. The big money is coming. Everything has to be perfect. Perfect. The menu was special. The flower arrangements were bigger, and for the first time, the piano was going to be used. A pianist had been hired, a man from the city symphony, to provide sophisticated ambience. Alara worked her usual station, but the energy in the room was different. The laughter was louder, more confident. The men wore richer suits, the women sharper jewelry. They talked about deals and markets, and things that sounded powerful and far away. She moved among them, invisible as always, filling wine glasses and clearing plates of half-eaten $100 food. The pianist was good. He played smooth, complicated jazz that flowed through the room like another kind of air. Alara found her circuit taking her past the piano more often. Each time, the music wrapped around her, and each time, she had to consciously unclench her jaw, loosen her shoulders, and keep moving. Then, during the dessert course, it happened. The pianist, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, suddenly went pale. He stopped playing in the middle of a song, muttered an apology to the room, and hurried off toward the restrooms. A hand clutched to his stomach. A worried murmur went through the investors. The manager rushed over, his face slick with sweat. He conferred with the pianist at the edge of the room, and his shoulders slumped. Food poisoning. The man couldn't continue. Panic flashed in the manager's eyes. He stepped into the center of the room, clapping his hands together. A minor hiccup, folks. Our musician is feeling unwell, but the night must go on. We'll comp a round of artisan cognac. And he searched desperately for a solution. And I invite any of our distinguished guests, if you feel so inclined, to grace us with a tune or two on our beautiful Bosendorfer. A free tasting menu for the brave soul. There were a few chuckles, but no one moved. These were people who bought companies, not people who played piano for free desserts. That's when he stood up. He was at the best table, right in front. A man in a suit that probably cost more than Alara's car. He had a loud, easy voice that was used to filling rooms. He'd been drinking heavily, and his face had a flushed, pleased look. "I'll tell you what," he boomed, silencing the room. He pointed, not at another guest, but at the edge of the room where Alara stood, frozen, holding a silver pot of coffee. "I've been watching our little waitress here all night. She keeps looking at that piano like it's a long-lost friend." He chuckled, and a few people chuckled with him. He pulled a crisp $100 bill from his wallet and held it up. "I have a bet. I bet she thinks she can play. Come on, sweetheart. Don't be shy. Humor us. Play us something simple. Chopsticks? Mary had a little lamb? This is for you." He waved the money. The room's attention, warm and amused, slammed onto Alara. She felt it like a physical heat on her skin. She saw the other waiters staring, mouths slightly open. She saw the manager's face, a terrible mix of hope and horror. Her heart was a frantic bird in her chest. Every instinct screamed to shake her head, to mumble, "I don't play," to disappear into the kitchen walls. That was the rule. Stay quiet. Stay safe. Stay no one. But as she looked at the man's smug, laughing face, at the money meant to buy a trick from the help, something else stirred. It was a hot, sharp coal in her stomach. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a pure, clean anger she hadn't felt in years. It cut through the fog of her daily numbness dot, and then her eyes flicked to the piano. The silent, beautiful beast. The closed lid. In her mind, she didn't see the black gloss. She saw her own small hands, a lifetime ago, on keys just like those. She heard a gruff, loving voice say, again, from the top. And this time, feel it. Don't just play the notes. The quiet in her head wasn't quiet anymore. It was a roar of memory and sound, held back by a dam that was suddenly, dangerously thin. The manager gave her a desperate, pleading look. The man with the money raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. Elara looked down at the coffee pot in her hand. Slowly, carefully, she set it down on a nearby service stand. The clink of silver on wood was terribly loud in the hushed room. She didn't look at the smirking man. She didn't look at her shocked coworkers. She smoothed her hands down the front of her simple black apron, and then she walked, step by step, across the patterned carpet towards the giant, silent piano. The walk to the piano felt like crossing a wide, empty field under a spotlight. Every eye in the room was nailed to her. She could hear the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats, the faint clink of a glass being set down too hard. The air, which a moment before had been full of low chatter and the smell of coffee and dessert, was now still and thick. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your ears. Her own breathing was too loud in her head. Her heart beat a hard, fast rhythm against her ribs, like it was trying to escape. The man with the $100 bill was still standing, his arm extended, but the smirk on his face had frozen. He looked confused, as if the prop in his joke had suddenly started moving on its own. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the piano. The black surface of it grew larger, swallowing up her view. It wasn't just a piece of furniture anymore. It was a cliff edge, a door to a room she had sealed shut years ago and thrown away the key. From the corner of her eye, she saw the manager. His face was pale. He was probably calculating the scene. A humiliated waitress making a fool of herself would be almost as bad as no music at all. He took a half step forward, maybe to stop her, but then hesitated. She reached the piano. For a second, she just stood beside it, her hand resting on its cool, curved side. The wood felt alive under her palm. It hummed with a memory of vibration, of old music sleeping inside. This was the moment to turn around, to shake her head, to mumble an apology, to scurry back to the kitchen where it was safe and noisy, and she was no one. She could almost feel the relief that would follow, a horrible, shameful relief. They would all laugh, a little uncomfortable, and the man would shrug and put his money away. And the story would be about the silly waitress who almost dared, but didn't. But then she thought of his voice. "Play us something simple, sweetheart." The word simple hung in her mind. It wasn't just an insult. It was a wall people built around her, a box they put her in. The quiet girl, the efficient waitress, the person you could bet $100 to perform a trick. A different kind of heat spread through her chest, pushing back against the cold fear. It wasn't just anger now. It was something older, a defiance. She turned and faced the bench. With a movement that felt both strange and deeply familiar, she pulled it out and sat down. The leather creaked softly. The room let out a collective, quiet breath, as if they were all holding it. The keys were hidden under the long, heavy lid. She reached out, her fingers finding the familiar brass latch. The click it made was a tiny, sharp sound in the quiet. She lifted the lid, folding it back. There they were. 80-8 keys. A landscape of white and black. They were so clean, so perfect. They looked almost fake under the warm restaurant lights. She hadn't sat in front of keys like this in 7 years. Her hands settled in her lap. They were trembling. She stared at them. These were her waitress hands. Short, neat nails. A small burn on the thumb from a hot plate last week. A faint scar across the knuckle from a broken glass. They were good at carrying, at cleaning, at pouring. They were not these hands, but then she let herself remember. Just for a flash. She remembered hands that were smaller, skinnier, dancing across a different keyboard. Hands that were strong and sure. Hands that belonged to a girl who knew exactly who she was. She could feel the weight of the silence now. It was waiting. It was getting impatient. Someone coughed. A chair scraped Dot slowly. She lifted her hands from her lap. They felt heavy, like they were made of stone. She hovered them over the keys. The posture was still in her muscles, buried deep. Elbows at the right angle, wrists loose, fingers curved. It came back without her asking. Dot, what was she doing? She couldn't play. Not here. Not now. Not for them. The first note would be a disaster. It would be a wrong, ugly sound, and the spell would break, and the laughter would come. Her mind was a blank, white sheet of panic. All the music she had ever known, the thousands of hours of practice, the pieces she could once play in her sleep, it was all gone. Wiped clean. All she could see was the expectant, amused faces in the shadows beyond the piano light. The man with the money cleared his throat loudly. "Any time now," he said, and his voice was full of that same mocking kindness. "We don't have all night." The sound of his voice was the trigger. It didn't spark fear this time. It sparked a cold, clear focus. She wasn't doing this for him. She wasn't doing it for the free dessert, or the manager, or the investors. She was doing it to prove, to herself more than anyone, that the girl with the hands that could fly wasn't completely gone. She didn't decide what to play. Her hands decided for her. Her right thumb pressed down on middle C dot. The note was pure. It wasn't a loud, dramatic crash. It was a single, clear, solid tone. It hung in the air, a simple statement. I am here. Then her left hand joined. Not a simple chord for chopsticks. It was a low, slow, rolling pattern, deep and thoughtful. It was the sound of footsteps in an empty hall. The sound of remembering Dot. Her right hand began to move. A melody unfolded, one note at a time. It was sad. There was no other word for it. It was a lonely, searching tune, winding its way through the deep river of sound from her left hand. It wasn't a song anyone there would know. It was hers. Something she had made up in her head during long bus rides and quiet nights. A tune that had lived only in the silence of her mind. Dot, as her fingers found the keys, a strange thing happened. The trembling stopped. The fear melted away, replaced by a concentration so deep it was like falling into a well. She wasn't in the restaurant anymore. The lights, the faces, the smell of food, it all faded into a blur. All that existed were the keys under her fingers and the sound coming out of the piano. The music began to change. The sad melody got stronger. It pushed against the deep notes, climbing higher. It wasn't happy, but it wasn't just sad anymore. It was angry. It was full of a sharp, aching loss. Her fingers moved faster, the left hand building a storm of sound, the right hand crying out over the top of it. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, the sound of a phone not ringing, the sound of a life turning down a dark, empty road. She wasn't thinking. Her body remembered. The muscle memory from a childhood spent at the piano, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, came flooding back. A difficult run of notes, a tricky crossing of hands. Her body executed it, without her brain's permission. It was like riding a bike, but the bike was made of emotion and memory. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a hot path down her cheek. She didn't notice. She was inside the music now. She was playing the car ride home in the rain. She was playing the hospital waiting room. She was playing the empty house after the funeral. She was playing the silence that had been her only friend for so long, the peace built to a crashing peak, a moment of pure, furious sorrow that made the very air in the room seem to shake. And then, just as suddenly, it broke. The storm passed. The music softened, pulled back. The left hand settled into a gentle, rocking rhythm. The right hand played a new melody, fragile and hopeful. It was like the first green shoot after a fire. It was tentative, unsure if it was allowed to grow. But it was there. It was a question. A maybe. She ended as simply as she began, with a few clean, resolved chords that settled on the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. The last note faded into the perfect silence. Her hands came to rest in her lap again. They were steady. For a long moment, nothing happened. The silence was complete, but it was a different silence than before. It wasn't waiting. It was full. Stunned out, she finally looked up, blinking as if waking from a deep sleep. The room came back into focus. No one was smiling. No one was smirking. The man with the $100 bill was still standing, but his arm was at his side. The money was forgotten, crumpled in his fist. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were wide. The manager was staring, his phone dangling forgotten from his hand. The other waitstaff were frozen in the doorway to the kitchen, their faces masks of shock. At a table near the front, an older woman had her hand pressed to her chest, and Ilara could see the glint of a tear on her cheek. Then one person began to clap. It was a single, slow, deliberate clap. Then another person joined, and another. It wasn't wild applause. It wasn't the cheers for a party trick. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of clapping that was almost a thank you. An acknowledgement. It spread through the room, growing stronger until everyone was on their feet. The sound of it was a physical wave that hit her. Ilara sat on the bench, surrounded by the sound of her own shattered silence, and the world she had built so carefully, the world where she was no one cracked apart forever. The applause didn't stop. It rolled over her in warm, unending waves. Ilara sat on the piano bench, her hands still folded in her lap, feeling utterly disconnected from the sound. It was as if the person they were clapping for was someone else, a stranger who had borrowed her body for a few minutes and then left, leaving her hollow and exposed. She became aware of the lights again, the faces, the blur of movement. Someone was shouting her name, her real name. It was the manager, his voice cutting through the noise. Ilara, Ilara, my God. She turned her head slowly. He was rushing toward her, his earlier panic replaced by a frantic, shining excitement. Behind him, the other waitstaff were gathering, their eyes wide. The busboy who had once asked if she was too smart for this job just stared, shaking his head in disbelief. She had to move. The feeling of being a specimen under a glass was becoming unbearable. She stood up, her legs wobbly. The movement seemed to break a spell. The applause began to die down, turning into a loud buzz of conversation. People were pointing, talking animatedly to each other, their eyes never leaving her. She didn't look at the man who had made the bet. She couldn't. She simply turned and walked, not toward the kitchen, but toward the narrow hallway that led to the staff entrance and the alley out back. She needed air. She needed the dark. Ilara, wait. The manager called after her. Where are you going? These people want to talk to you. She didn't answer. She pushed through the swinging door into the back hallway, the sounds of the dining room suddenly muffled. The concrete floor was cool. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes, trying to catch her breath that felt thin and useless. The music was still echoing inside her skull, a ghost now, mingling with the roar of the crowd. The door burst open. It was Sophia, one of the younger servers. Oh my God, Ilara, that was. I have no words. What was that? Why are you here? Her words tumbled out in an excited rush. Before Ilara could even think of an answer, the manager was there, squeezing into the hallway. Unbelievable. Did you plan that? Was that a setup? He was laughing, a high, nervous sound. Do you have any idea what this means? That was That was professional. That was genius. He kept talking, his words bouncing off the walls. We have to get you back out there. The gentleman from table 101 who, well, you know he wants to apologize. And others are asking. A woman says she writes for the culture section of the paper. This is incredible publicity. The word publicity hit her like a splash of cold water. She opened her eyes. No, she said, her voice a rasp. It was the first word she'd spoken since sitting at the piano. No? What do you mean, no? The manager's smile faltered. I don't want to talk to anyone. I need to finish my shift. The idea of going back to her tables, to refill water glasses and ask about dessert, was absurd. But it was the only anchor she had left. Finish your... Are you insane? You don't have a shift anymore. You're the talent now. He spread his hands wide. Look, just come out, take a bow, accept some compliments. It's good for business. The back door opened then, letting in a gust of cool night air. It was the kind-eyed busboy. He slipped in, holding a glass of water. He didn't say anything. He just handed it to her. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly against the cool glass, and drank. It was the kindest thing anyone had done all night. The manager's phone buzzed. He looked at it, his eyes going even wider. It's the owner. He's seen the video. Someone already posted a video. Elara felt the floor tilt. A video, of course. In her single-minded focus, the sea of phones held up in the darkness hadn't registered. Her private storm, her 7 years of silence, was now a public clip for anyone to watch. I'm going home, she said, setting the water glass down on a stack of clean linen. You can't go home. The owner wants to meet you. He's talking about a new concept of pianist waitress. We could charge a premium. The walls of the hallway seemed to be closing in. The manager's eager face, Sophia's bewildered one, the distant murmur of the crowd, it was all too much. It was the exact opposite of the quiet, invisible life she had crafted. I'm sick, she lied, the words thick in her throat. I need to go. She didn't wait for permission. She turned and pushed through the heavy metal door into the alley. The night air was a shock. It smelled of garbage and damp concrete, a familiar, ugly smell that was suddenly comforting. She leaned against the rough brick wall, gulping it in. She could still hear the faint, celebratory noise from inside. She had run away from the applause, but she couldn't run from what had just happened. It was out. The locked room inside her had been blasted open, and there was no closing the door. Her walk home was a blur. The city sounds, the honking cars, the chatter from bars felt distant, like she was hearing them from underwater. Her mind replayed the last few minutes on a loop. The feel of the keys, the crushing weight of the memory. The look on people's faces when the music shifted from sadness to fury. When she got to her apartment, her cat meowed angrily for his dinner. The normal routine felt like a ritual from another world. She fed him, her movements automatic. She sat on her couch, in the deep silence she had cultivated so carefully. But the silence was different now. It was no longer a blanket. It was an absence, an emptiness that highlighted the echo of the piano still ringing in her ears. Her phone, which usually sat quietly for days, began to buzz. It buzzed again and again. She looked at it. Notifications. A social media app she rarely used was exploding. Tags, mentions, messages. Someone had tagged her in the video. The caption read, Waitress destroys rude CEO with piano mastery. Name that tune? Hashtag hidden talent, hashtag viral. She put the phone face down on the table, her heart thudding dully. She felt naked. The next morning, the world had changed. The manager called her 3 times before 8 a.m. His messages were a mix of pleading and business proposals. Call me. The paper wants an interview. The owner is offering you a contract. You've got messages here from a talent agent. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from the app. Strangers were commenting, thousands of them. Asterisk. What's the name of this piece? Shazam doesn't know it. Asterisk, asterisk. She's not just good, she's world class. What is she doing waiting tables? Asterisk, asterisk, I cried. For real. Asterisk, asterisk. That guy's face at the end is priceless. Asterisk, asterisk. Someone find out who her teacher was. Asterisk, the last comment made her flinch. She put the phone in a drawer and closed it. She didn't go to work. She called in, saying she was unwell. She knew she could never go back, not like before. The thought of putting on her black apron, of trying to be invisible again, was impossible. They had seen her. They all had docked in the afternoon. There was a knock on her door. Her stomach clenched. No one ever came here. She peered through the peephole. It was the busboy from work. She opened the door a crack. Hey, he said softly. He looked embarrassed. I didn't want to bother you. But the manager is going crazy. And some people came to the restaurant asking for you. A guy with a camera. The manager gave them your name, but I don't think he knew your address. I just wanted to warn you. She nodded, a lump in her throat. Thanks. He shifted on his feet. Listen, I don't know what that was last night, but it was the most real thing I've ever heard. You shouldn't hide from it. He gave her an awkward, sympathetic smile and left. His words stayed with her. You shouldn't hide from it. But hiding was all she knew how to do. Hiding had been survival. As evening fell, the buzzing in the drawer grew persistent. With a sense of dread, she took the phone out. There was a new message, not a social media notification, but an email. The subject line made her blood run cold. Asterisk, asterisk, inquiry regarding Alexander Volkov, asterisk, asterisk, her grandfather's name. With shaking fingers, she opened it. It was from the head of the piano department at a prestigious music conservatory in the city, a place she had once dreamed of attending as a teenager. Dear Ilara, the email began. Asterisk, I watched the video from the Gilded Sparrow last night. Beyond the remarkable technique, which is evident, the emotional composition was stunning. It reminded me, in its structural depth and particular phrasing in the second movement, of the work of the late pianist and teacher Alexander Volkov. I studied his pedagogical methods in my youth. The resemblance is uncanny. Upon researching, I see you share his surname. Could you be related? If so, and if you are the composer and performer of that piece, I would be deeply interested in speaking with you. We have a scholarship program for uniquely gifted late-stage students. Your talent should not be behind a waitress tray, no matter how elegant the restaurant. Please call me at your convenience. Asterisk, she read the email 3 times. The words swam on the screen. They knew. They had connected the dots. The music had given her away. It had always been his music, too. His teaching, his soul, was in every note she played, even in the piece she thought was her own. She hadn't been playing just her grief. She had been playing his. The locked room wasn't just open. Someone was shining a light inside, recognizing the furniture. The past she had tried to bury had reached out, not with a ghost's cold hand, but with a scholarship and an understanding ear. She sat in her quiet apartment, the phone heavy in her hand, the city lights twinkling outside her window. The life of the quiet waitress was gone. In its place were 2 terrifying paths: the loud public circus of viral fame, or the painful, shining door to the world she had run from. Both demanded that she stop hiding. Both demand. For 3 days, Ilara became a ghost in her own home. She unplugged the landline, turned her phone completely off. and only went out at odd hours to buy groceries from the corner store. The world outside her door felt dangerous, full of voices that wanted a piece of the person in the video. She wasn't that person, not really. That person was a raw nerve, a moment of pure feeling. The woman hiding in the apartment was just tired, but the world had a way of finding you. On the fourth morning, there was a different kind of knock. Not the quick, friendly tap of the busboy, but a firm, steady rhythm. Alara looked through the peephole, and her heart stopped. Standing in the dim hallway was her mother. She looked older, of course. 7 years older. Her hair was styled differently, a sharp blonde cut that didn't suit her. She was dressed in a smart coat, clutching a large handbag. Her face was a mask of complicated emotions, nervousness, a flicker of guilt, and underneath it all, a weary kind of hope. Alara stood frozen, her hand on the doorknob. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to pretend she wasn't home. But the silence stretched, and her mother's shoulders slumped slightly. She knew. Slowly, Alara unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see her mother's face clearly. "Hello, Alara," her mother said. Her voice was softer than Alara remembered. "How did you find me?" Alara's own voice sounded flat. "A girl from your work." "Sophia? She was very helpful when I called the restaurant. She said you might need family." Her mother looked past her, into the sparse apartment. "Can I come in?" Alara stepped back, allowing her in. The small space felt even smaller with her mother there. They stood awkwardly, the history between them like a third person in the room. "I saw the video," her mother said finally, not sitting down. "Everyone saw it. My friends, my colleagues. They sent it to me. They said, 'Is this your Alara?' And what did you say?" Alara crossed her arms. "I said yes." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I watched it 20 times. I heard him in it. Your grandfather. In every note. The mention of him was a physical ache." Alara said nothing. "I know. I know what you think of me," her mother continued, her words coming in a rush now. "After the accident, after he was gone, I said terrible things. I told you to stop. I said music was a curse, that it had taken him from us with all those long trips for concerts, and then it took him for good. I was grieving, and I was scared. Scared you would disappear into that world too, or that you would fail at it and have nothing. I thought I was pushing you toward something safe, a normal life." Alara remembered the fights, the slammed doors, the final, awful ultimatum. "Stop this childish dream, or you are no longer welcome here." She had chosen the dream, and then, a month later, crushed by grief and her mother's rejection, she had abandoned the dream anyway. She had run away from both. "A normal life," Alara echoed, looking around at her silent apartment. "Yeah, it's very safe." Her mother flinched. "I was wrong. I see that now. Watching you play. It was like seeing him come back to life. But it was you. It was all you." She took a step forward, her hand reaching out slightly before dropping back to her side. "The video. The offers. This is a second chance. For both of us. Let me help you. I have contacts. I can manage this for you. We can choose the right interviews, the right opportunities. We can do this properly." And there it was. The guilt was real, maybe, but so was the opportunity. Her mother saw a project, a way to fix a past mistake by managing a future success. The relief Alara might have felt at an apology curdled into something else. She didn't want to be managed. She didn't want to be a project. "I don't need help," Alara said, turning away to look out the window. "Of course you do. This is a storm, Alara. You can't navigate it alone. Those talent agents, they'll eat you alive." That conservatory email, you must answer it. But you need advice. You need family. The word hung in the air. It was too big, too broken. I need you to go, Elara said softly. Her mother looked stricken. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She nodded, digging into her large handbag. She pulled out a small, wrapped package and set it on the small kitchen table. I brought this. For you. Just think about what I said. Call me, please. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Elara didn't touch the package. She just stared at it, feeling more alone than ever. Later that afternoon, driven by a restless anxiety, she did something foolish. She turned on her phone and went back to the restaurant. Not to work, but to collect her final paycheck and the few personal things from her locker. She went just after the lunch rush, hoping to avoid a scene. The manager saw her the moment she walked in. He practically sprinted across the dining room. You're back. Thank God. Are you ready to talk? The offers are piling up. I'm just here for my things, she said, heading for the back. He followed her, talking nonstop. A morning show wants a live performance and interview. A music producer dropped off a demo contract. And that guy, the investor from the other night, he's been here twice asking for you. He left something. Elara ignored him, emptying her locker into a tote bag, a spare hair tie, a half-used tube of hand cream, a water bottle. The manager scurried to his office and came back with a small, high-quality cardboard box and a plain white envelope. He was actually really decent about it. Seemed pretty ashamed. He said to give this to you, no strings attached. Elara took the box and the envelope, wanting only to escape. She didn't open them until she was on a bench in the little park a few blocks away. The sounds of the city a dull roar around her. She opened the envelope first. Inside was a short note, written on thick, expensive paper in a sharp handwriting. Asterisk, I owe you a profound apology. My behavior was boorish and cruel. I attempted to buy a moment of amusement at your expense, and you gave the room a moment of art instead. I was the one who was made small. I've taken the liberty of doing a little research. I believe the enclosed might belong to you, more than it does to any archive. A small token of my regret. No response expected. Asterisk, it was signed with his initials. Puzzled, she opened the cardboard box. Inside, nestled in foam, was an old, unmarked CD in a clear plastic sleeve, and a modern, small USB drive. Taped to the USB drive was a handwritten label. Asterisk A. Volkov, private studio session. 2009. Digitized. Asterisk her breath caught. 2009. A year before the accident. Her hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped the USB drive. She hurried home, her heart hammering. She plugged the drive into her old laptop. There was a single audio file. She clicked play. For a second, there was just the faint hiss of empty tape. Then a voice. Gruff, warm, tinged with the soft accent of his homeland. Asterisk, testing, testing. Okay, Lena, it's running. So today, for my little shadow, I am playing the Sokolov piece, the one you like, with the rain sounds in the second movement. Listen to the pedal here, my darling. It is not a foot. It is a breath. Asterisk, and then he began to play. Elara curled into a ball on her floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, as the sound of her grandfather's piano filled her silent apartment. It wasn't a perfect recording. It was intimate. You could hear him humming softly, the creak of the bench, a distant car horn. It was a moment stolen from time, a moment meant for her. He finished the piece. There was a long pause on the tape. Then his voice came again, quieter now. Asterisk, one day you will play this better than me. You have the heart for it. Remember, music is not in the notes on the page. It is in the space between the notes you play and the silence you leave behind. That is where the feeling lives. That is where you will find yourself when you are lost. Never be afraid of the silence, Ilara. It is your friend. Asterisk, the recording ended. She sat there for a long time, the silence of the apartment now profound, but different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of his words. Never be afraid of the silence. She thought of the conservatory email, an open door to the world he loved. She thought of her mother's offer, a managed public path. She thought of the viral storm, a path of noise and fleeting fame. And she thought of the investor, a stranger who had, in his own awkward way, given her back a piece of her soul. He had listened. He had heard more than just good playing. He had heard him. She got up. She walked to the table and picked up her mother's wrapped package. She opened it. Inside was a framed photograph she hadn't seen in years. It was of the three of them, her grandfather, her mother, and herself, at about age 12, all squinting in the sunshine outside a concert hall. They were all smiling. Her mother's smile looked real. Ilara traced the glass over her grandfather's face. She had been trying to outrun the past, but the past wasn't a monster chasing her. It was the foundation she kept tripping over. It was the reason she could play at all. She couldn't hide anymore. But she didn't have to walk the path of loudest noise, either. There was another way, a way that honored the silence between the notes. She sat down at her laptop. She opened a new email. She addressed it to the head of the piano department at the conservatory. Asterisk, dear Professor. Asterisk, she typed, her fingers steady for the first time in days. Asterisk, thank you for your email. Yes, Alexander Volkov was my grandfather and my teacher. I would be honored to speak with you about your scholarship program. However, I am not the prodigy I once was. I am a student who has been lost for a long time. If you have room for someone who needs to learn how to listen again, I would be grateful for the chance. The manager was confused by her proposal. You want to play for free for the staff? I don't understand. Not for free, Ilara said, her voice clearer than it had been in weeks. For them, and for me. One last time on my terms. No investors, no cameras. Just the people who worked beside me. After closing. He agreed, mostly because he thought it might lead to her changing her mind about the pianist waitress idea. She didn't correct him. The night arrived. The last customers had left. The chairs were upturned on the tables for mopping, and the main dining lights were off. Only the soft, golden lights around the bar and over the piano were glowing. The air smelled of cleaning spray and stale bread. The staff drifted in, curious and a little awkward. The young servers, the busboys, the line cooks still in their stained aprons, the dishwashers with tired eyes. They stood in a loose half-circle around the piano, not quite sure what they were there for. It wasn't a show. It was something else. ELA stood by the piano. She felt nervous, but it was a clean nervousness. Not the fear of being seen, but the quiet fear of sharing something real. I wanted to say thank you, she began, her voice carrying in the quiet room. For the last year. For letting me be quiet. And for being here now. She glanced at the kind-eyed busboy, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. The piece I played that night, it was full of things I couldn't say this one. This one is something else. She sat down. The bench felt familiar now, not like a cliff's edge. She looked at the keys, no longer seeing a stranger's hands, but seeing her own. They were still waitress hands, with the small burn and the faint scar. But they were also her grandfather's student's hands. They were her hands. She didn't play the stormy, sad piece from the fore. She began with the simple, clear melody her grandfather had played on the recording, the one with the rain sounds. Her touch was lighter now, more forgiving. As she played, she didn't disappear into the music. She stayed present. She heard the soft shuffle of a foot on the carpet. She saw the tired cook leaning his head back, closing his eyes. She felt the room listening, not as an audience, but as witnesses. Then, gently, she began to weave in the new melody, the fragile, hopeful one she had ended with that first night. It danced around her grandfather's theme, sometimes following it, sometimes gently challenging it. It was a conversation across time. It was her saying, "I remember," and him answering, "I am here." The music was not a performance of pain. It was an act of repair. It was the sound of two silences meeting, the angry, lonely silence she had lived in, and the wise, patient silence her grandfather had told her was a friend. They blended together in the chords, creating something new, something that was neither entirely sad nor entirely happy, but whole. When the last note faded, the room was still. Not the stunned silence of before, but a peaceful, full one. The busboy wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. The manager, standing in the back, just looked thoughtful, his earlier eagerness gone dot. No one clapped. It didn't feel right. Instead, people just nodded, murmured "thank you," and began to drift back to finishing their closing duties. It was perfect. A week later, Alara walked through the iron gates of the conservatory. The grand old building, all stone and ivy, had always seemed like a fortress from the outside. Today, it looked like a library, a place for study, not for battles. Her meeting with the head of the piano department was not what she expected. The professor was an older woman with sharp eyes and gentle hands. She didn't ask for a demonstration. "I heard everything I needed to hear in that video," the professor said. "I heard Volkov's technique. But more importantly, I heard your voice. The one that comes after the technique. The one that hurts and then hopes." She slid a packet of papers across the desk. "This is the scholarship. It is for a special, non-traditional student. It requires work study in our archives, and it expects you to be a beginner in some ways and a peer in others. It will be confusing. It will be hard. You will have to listen to children half your age play scales better than you can right now. Can you handle that?" Alara thought of the silent apartment, the roaring restaurant, the peaceful, empty dining room after her private concert. She thought of the space between the notes. "Yes," she said, "I think I can." Life did not become a fairy tale. The first few months at the conservatory were a humbling grind. Her fingers, while remembering the music, had lost their stamina. She had to rebuild the strength in her hands, the calluses in new places. She sat in practice rooms next to 18-year-olds whose technique was flawless and whose hearts had not yet been broken. Sometimes the envy was a bitter taste in her mouth, but she also had things they didn't. She knew how to work. The discipline of a double shift translated well to 4 hours of focused practice. She knew what silence cost, so she wasn't afraid of it in her music. And in the archives, organizing old sheet music and concert programs, she found quiet joy. She found a program from 1994 with her grandfather's name listed as a performer. She traced the printed letters with her finger, feeling a connection that was no longer painful. She did not call the talent agents. She did not go on television. The viral video slowly faded, replaced by the next sensation. She was, for the most part, forgotten by the public. And she was grateful. One rainy afternoon, she was in a practice room, wrestling with a difficult passage of a modern piece. It was all sharp angles and discord, nothing like the flowing music she loved. She was frustrated, ready to give up. There was a soft knock on the door. It was the professor. "May I?" she asked, entering. She listened for a moment. You're fighting it. You're trying to make it sound pretty. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's supposed to sound like that crack in the wall of your old apartment. It's supposed to sound like the hum of the restaurant fridge at 3 a.m. Play the anger. Play the frustration. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She stopped trying to control it. She attacked the keys, letting the music be ugly and broken. And suddenly it made sense. It was alive. When she finished, the professor smiled. Good. Now you are not just playing notes. You are speaking. After the professor left, Elara sat in the quiet room, the rain streaking the window. She thought of the investor, the one who had given her the recording. She had never thanked him. She had been too afraid that any contact would be an opening, a pull back into that world of deals and offers. But now she felt differently. She opened her email and found his note from months before. She wrote a short reply. Asterisk, thank you for the CD. It was the kindest gift I have ever received. It helped me find my way back to the silence. I hope you are well. Elara. Asterisk, she didn't expect a reply. But one came an hour later, brief and to the point. Asterisk, I am well. I still listen to your piece, the one from the restaurant. My colleagues think I've developed taste. I'm glad the silence is a friend. If you ever give a proper recital, I would like a ticket. No VIP section. Just a seat in the back. Asterisk, she read it and smiled. It felt like a thread neatly tied, not a door left open. That evening, she went to her mother's apartment for dinner. It was still stiff, and the conversation was careful. But they talked about normal things, the leak in her mother's kitchen, the difficult piece Elara was learning. They did not talk about the past as a problem to be solved. They treated it like an old, heavy piece of furniture in the room. They had to walk around it, but they could still share the space dot as she was leaving. Her mother handed her a small, familiar notebook. It was the one Elara used to scribble her own musical ideas in as a teenager, long abandoned. I found it when I was cleaning out some boxes, her mother said. I thought you might want it. On the train home, Elara flipped through the pages. Her childish handwriting, bits of melodies, angry doodles in the margins. It was the diary of the girl she had been. She didn't feel sad looking at it. She felt like she was meeting someone interesting, someone she had lost touch with. She got off the train and walked towards her building, the notebook tucked under her arm. Her life was not a grand concert hall. It was a small practice room, a quiet archive, an occasional awkward dinner. It was rebuilding her hands, note by note. It was learning that her voice was not just in the beautiful melodies, but in the difficult, discordant ones too. She was no longer the waitress. She was not the tragic prodigy. She was not the viral sensation. She was a student. She was a woman slowly mending the bridge between her past and her future. She was someone who had learned that sometimes the most stunning thing you can do is not to shock a room into silence, but to finally speak softly into the silence you already own, and to discover your own voice waiting there for you, patient as a friend.